Hey photographers, here's a trend you might like. Camera companies loading mid-range cameras with their best features. This is Fujifilm's X-T30. Certainly nowhere near their flagship models in price, but in April 2019, it has the best focus capability of any Fujifilm model. Not a slouch in other areas either. In fact, it has most of what I loved about the Fujifilm X-T3. That makes it worthy of consideration for both stills photographers and video creators, particularly as it's a small and stylish camera with full controls. The 4th generation 26 megapixel APS-C size X-Trans sensor delivers outstanding color, crisp details, great contrast, and provides better than average low light images. Small size has its advantages. It makes it easy to carry, both in my hand and in a bag, and disadvantages. You may prefer a larger grip. The front bulges just enough to hold. The back holds my thumb nicely. Most controls are on the right side within easy reach. I'm going to start by pairing my phone using Bluetooth. This synchronizes time, so I don't have to, and saves GPS information with my images. The app does auto and manual image transfer to the phone and works as a remote, which is handy as the screen doesn't do selfie mode. Fujifilm's app has a few other advantages. It manages firmware updates, so no computer is needed to get the latest released. I'm impressed by the focus system, so let's start there. Switch to continuous mode, that's C on the switch on front. The setting displays on-screen bottom left, and turn on face detect, selecting Eye Auto, which also appears on screen. Now, what's immediately obvious is how quickly the X-T30 picks up faces, even when they're small in the frame, they're partly obscured, or not facing the camera. But while it is very good and very impressive, it's not perfect, as there are always faces that don't seem to get detected. The lenses I'm using in this review include the XF18-55, which is often sold as a kit, the XF16-55, the lens I prefer for video production, but is really a little too big for this camera, the new 16mm f2.8, a wide-angle lens which matches the camera nicely. It's small and light, can focus as close as 17 centimeters with a filter diameter of 49mm. It has a detented aperture ring with an A setting and an unmarked unlimited travel focus ring. I've used it for most of the photos in this video. The focus area options include all, which is the setting I use, and although it's not available in all modes, I set the focus points to the maximum 425. Press the focus area selection joystick to see the grid of points that covers the entire screen. Turn the front command dial to cycle through the size options. You'll see that some only have 117 focus points, and all can be moved using the joystick. From a small pinpoint at the edge of the screen to a larger area in the center, focus responds quickly, confidently, and accurately. Even if the subject is at the lens's closest focus distance, it hits its mark. Fuji's focus engine is nearing best in class, and combined with the usability of the focus controls is my favorite. In continuous, the largest area becomes tracking, but Fujifilm doesn't provide the ability to select and track an object. Yet, with their continuous upgrades to focus and frequent firmware updates, this may be next on their agenda. In continuous, there are several options to follow objects. These custom options are presets for specific situations, and if those don't work for you, the custom setting exposes all 3 settings to fine-tune for your needs. No other manufacturer provides the variety of options for manual focus you'll find here. Start by turning the focus check option on. In autofocus, turn on AF plus MF. There's a confirmation icon bottom left. Then, while soft pressing the shutter or the AFL key, the camera will focus, then turn the focus ring on the lens to fine-tune. With the focus switch on M, a turn of the focus ring on the lens punches into the expanded view. Use the joystick to position. Press the back dial to change the magnification. and then turn the focus ring to adjust the focus. Now, if that doesn't work for you, press the rear dial to switch to the digital split image. Align the object you want in focus. The front tulip is lined up, but the back tulip isn't. To focus it, adjust the ring until it is. Press the rear dial again for a digital microprism. The goal is to minimize the grid over the object you want in focus. Press one more time for peaking, which shows the edges of objects in focus. Now, by default, it's white. Changing it to red makes it easier to see with yellow tulips. The on-screen distance ruler can be helpful. As I am adjusting the aperture, the blue bar on either side of the distance indicates the depth of field. The menu offers the option of setting the focus ring to turn clockwise or counterclockwise, and also a linear or nonlinear mode. In the linear mode, a specific point on the focus ring represents an exact focal distance. For video, this means that the focus puller can set one or more marks on the ring to change focus from one subject to another. So even if you don't have a cinema lens, another lens can act like one. The X-T30 also makes back focus simple. Switch to manual mode, use the joystick to select the focus point, press the AFL button. No odd menu settings, so when you want to return to shutter interlock, turn the dial back to C or S. You'll have to go to the Drive menu to find the focus bracket feature. Assign it to one of the bracket settings on the dial and then select the options. Now, obviously, it's different for each lens and situation. To take enough photos with all the tulips in focus, I used 20 images with a step of 7. I figured that out with trial and error. Verify the photos, then take them to Photoshop to stack them into an image where they're all in focus. Let me show you a couple of the more obscure focus features. Fujifilm doesn't have a way to save and prioritize specific faces. If more than one face is detected, one will be highlighted in green, but if that's not the bride, how do you switch to her? Go to the button settings and assign a key to the Page 2 Face Select function. Then press the key to activate face selection. Touch the face you want prioritized, or use the joystick to toggle among all the selected faces. The top panel control configuration is straightforward. In addition to the function key, power on, shutter release, shutter speed, the exposure compensation dial, and the full auto mode switch. The positioning of the Q button, it opens the quick settings menu, is a little awkward on the thumb rest. I found I accidentally triggered it much too often, and it is not a configurable key, either to assign another function or to turn it off. The back command dial has exposure lock on the left, focus lock on the right. There's also a front command dial. Fujifilm has removed the navigation control circle. Instead, navigation is performed using the joystick and sometimes touch. I find that easier. However, those buttons also provided for function shortcuts. Those have been replaced with touch swipe actions, which are great, but I'm still finding them less reliable. Now, you'd think that that covers it, but there are customizations that extend the functionality of the front and the rear command dials. On the left side, the smaller than usual 2.5mm mic or remote connector, a USB-C connector, and micro HDMI. USB-C charges and powers the camera. The power icon appears bottom right. With an adapter, USB can be used as a headphone port. Super useful, particularly as it's not the norm in cameras this size. Now, you may be looking for a mode dial. There isn't one. Fujifilm has found an innovative solution, which makes a dial to select program, aperture, shutter, and manual modes unnecessary. There's a shutter dial on the body and an aperture ring on the lens. This is the 16mm f2.8. Each has an A position for auto. If you set the shutter speed, the screen indicates you've changed from P to S. Then change the aperture and it indicates manual mode. Much simpler. The shutter speed dial can be set from 1/4000 to 1 second, as well as timer and bulb. These are full stop increments. For the smaller 1/3 stop adjustments, use the back control dial. In timer mode, it can set all speeds from 15 minutes up to 1/4000. With the electronic shutter, speeds up to 1/32,000 can be selected. By default, the front dial sets the ISO. The standard range is 160 to 12,800. Using the mechanical shutter provides access to two high settings indicated as 25.6 and 51.2, and at the other end 3 low settings, 80, 100, and 125. The high ISOs are pretty clean, up to 6400 in out-of-camera JPEGs. Even 12.8 is an acceptable image, particularly in low light. I start to see artifacts at 25.6, and at 51.2 the detail's gone to mush. Color purity is still reasonable though. The dial can also be used to select the 3 AutoISO settings, which are configured on the menu. As I mostly leave the shutter in auto mode, I use 3 to manage both ISO and shutter. Auto 1 with a minimum shutter of 160 and a max ISO of 800. I use that in sunny conditions. Then Auto 2 is 125 with a maximum of 6400. And Auto 3 with 1/60th and a max of 12,800. I use that for low light interiors. And Auto 2 as my default. I usually set the meter, Fujifilm calls this photometry, and it's not available when face detect is on. I'd appreciate the opportunity to set it for occasions when there isn't a face in the image, as opposed to having to menu around to turn face detect off. Multi, center-weighted, spot, and average are available. Spot, going back to the focus screens, can be interlinked with the focus spot. Fujifilm's color management system is built around their film simulations, and although I usually shoot with vivid chrome and acros, they all have attributes suitable for specific scenes and purposes. Within the acros settings, there are 3 color filters to fine-tune the effect, and in the menu, the color adjustment can add a filter for warmer amber tones or cooler blue. I'm not sure why the acros setting is so appealing, maybe because it invokes a certain historical feeling, but I really enjoy walking the streets of Toronto and snapping up the scene. Black and white modes on other cameras don't deliver the same creative energy. There are settings to add a subtle grain, and controls to fine-tune the highlights and shadows for scenes where the X-Trans sensor's contrast feels a little high, and more controls to adjust saturation and sharpness. For a little more playful approach, try the advanced filters to access a wider range of options. There are more sophisticated ways to create these effects, but for quick results, these can be effective. Use the drive settings to assign your favorites to the advanced filter positions on the drive mode dial. And although I do feel that they're gimmicky, I've assigned pop color and dynamic tone to these positions. The nice feature here is that if RAW plus JPEG is enabled, you'll always have an image that's free of those settings, so that you can take the image back to Lightroom to fine-tune at leisure. So if the black and white image seems to need color, that's still available to you. Incidentally, the range of detail that can be recovered both in highlights and shadow provides more flexibility than I expect. The X-T30 has 2 interesting settings, Sports Finder and PreShot, but their limitations leave me a little underwhelmed. Sports Finder works only with the mechanical shutter, which means a maximum burst rate of 8 frames per second. The screen display changes. The black box is the image area so that you can see your subject on screen before they get to the image area, which is the advantage of this mode. Note upper left the crop of 1.25 and the warning M, which reduces the size of the image from large to medium or 17 megapixels. The question is, with continuous wide tracking, can we get focus and snap the image as the train enters the shot? Yes, in this simple test that works. That first image is in focus. In real life, with many more variables, it's not quite as reliable. And then there's PreShot, which buffers images while the shutter is soft pressed and saves a few before you release the shutter, eliminating or reversing any shutter lag that my old analog digits have accumulated. But PreShot is incompatible with Sports Finder, as it's only available with the electronic shutter and the CH burst mode. Wouldn't it make sense to have the shutter setting before these features? Anyway, with the shutter set burst on high, I'm soft pressing the shutter, and I release when the engine gets to the center. Counting back from center, it saved 8 images. Oh, and these are full resolution. Do try these features out before the crucial moment, and they might help you get that perfect shot. There are 2 burst settings on the dial. The frame rates are selected in the menu. With the mechanical shutter, the only option is 8 frames. Shooting fine JPEGs with manual focus and exposure, it says 8 and it takes 8, and the buffer holds up for 40 seconds before slowing to about 5 per second. With the electronic shutter, 10 and 20 frame settings are available. These are silent. At 20 in the first second, it does capture 20 images, then 11 in the second, continuing at 8 per second. And there are 3 more crop modes, the same crop as Sports Finder, also electronic shutter, and 17 megapixel images. At 30, 25 images in the first second, then about 10 per second. There are brackets for exposure, quite extensive, up to 9 images, up to 3 stops. The display below shows the range. Then ISO, 1/3 to 1 stop. Film simulations, choose 3. And white balance with 3 settings. There's a self-timer with 2 and 10 seconds, and the usual Fujifilm Easter egg, use burst mode to take 5 images. The dial also has a multi-exposure mode and an in-camera panorama. This little powerhouse can also accommodate novice photographers. Flip the switch to auto to override whatever setting you had, but it won't save raw files in this mode. It does identify scenes like macro for flower photography or portraits, and it's the perfect switch for a partner or friend who wants to take a photo. Switch it back, and all your settings return. Now, some viewers will be disappointed by the lack of onboard stabilization. Although that can be a useful feature in some situations, I won't miss it here. For stills, a faster lens or a tripod is a good substitute, and for video, the only thing that stabilizes a handheld shot is a gimbal. The X-T30 works very nicely on my Ronin S. Video mode offers a great deal of creative potential. I'm starting with the last option on screen 4 of the video menu, Movie Silent Control, as it's totally useful and completely disguised. When it's on, none of the physical controls work. All settings are changed using touch, so the internal mics don't pick up clicking noises from the dials. That's clearly useful and handy. But, and it's a good but, this feature also separates all of its settings from the stills mode. With Movie Silent on, switching from stills to video and back resumes all the previous settings from the other mode. This is such an aha moment, such a powerful feature for a hybrid camera, it makes every camera that doesn't do this an inferior device. And because Rob asked this question about the X-T30, let me provide a little more detail. Although the only way to open the silent menu is touch, once open, both touch and the joystick can be used to navigate. There is a function key assignment to activate silent menu, but I can't find one to open the silent menu. That would be one feature request I'd have for an upcoming firmware release. Back to screen 1, and notice along the way the many other settings that are independent for video, so changing them here won't change the same still setting. Then, both 4K aspects, the 16:9 video and the 17:9 cinema, are supported, all without a sensor crop. The same aspects are available in HD 1080, and that's it. HD 16:9 supports frame rates from 24, drop and non-drop, up to 60 drop. The other 3 modes max at 30 frames. Data rates for all modes max at 200 megabits. That's the good news. The bad news is the record time limit. In 4K, maximum clip length is 10 minutes. In HD, 15. What nonsense! 2 competitors are now doing no limit. Fujifilm, step up! Time limits aside, the X-T30 delivers a high-quality image with lots of fine detail and excellent color, whether you're using Eterna, which I find a little light unless I add a color grade, or Chrome, I'm not sure which I prefer, so I'm going to suggest that each might be right for a specific situation. The high speed setting can create slow motion from 2 to 5 times, recording at 120 frames and matching that to a slower playback speed. Its recordings are silent. Fujifilm takes video very seriously. There's a mic import, although it is the smaller 2.5mm size and requires an adapter for most mics. Then, the USB port can output audio. I'm using a USB-C to audio adapter. The audio settings are best in class. Independent settings for internal and external mics with settings measured in decibels. Settings to manage the limiter, wind and rumble filters, on-screen meters, and quick access through the silent control panel round out the feature set. All 3 focus modes, including single, are available. With single, press the shutter to focus. The menu's AF mode setting selects either auto, called multi, or area. Although the area can be moved, it can't be sized. The continuous settings are simpler than those for stills, but you can set this sensitivity, how quickly it reacts when an object passes. With locked on, the focus stays with the station as the train passes. Changing to quick, focus switches to the train and then back. The full slate of face and eye detect settings are independently configurable in video mode, and in the past, Fujifilm's continuous autofocus couldn't be trusted to hold focus on a subject, or a face, or an eye, so I would use manual focus for a shot like this one. Now it identifies me, my face, my eye, and holds steady. That's a significant performance change that puts Fujifilm at the head of the pack. There are only 2 manual focus assist modes in video, expanded view or standard, and focus peaking. Turn the focus ring or press the back dial to punch in. You can do this while you're recording and it doesn't affect the recording. A nice touch here, if you're recording with an external monitor or recorder, only the LCD punches in, not the external monitor. Peaking, to show the edges of focused objects, is available in 2 sensitivities and 4 colors. In video, the only photometry mode is multi. For managing manual exposure, from the display custom settings, there's histogram and highlight alert. Histogram can also be assigned to a custom key, but neither histogram or the meter appear while you're adjusting the settings, and highlights doesn't seem to work in video mode. Luckily, there's Zebra. Not sure why this requires 2 menu entries, but it can be set from 50 to 100 and does appear while you're adjusting ISO. According to my Adamus recorder, the 100 setting reads as exactly 100 on a waveform. I'm also not sure about the 2 directions. That would be useful if you could set each independently at different levels. Zebra can also be assigned to a custom key. There are no ISO settings on the video menu. Back on the stills menu, the AutoISO settings can't be adjusted. The 3 low settings and high 51.2 are not available. When shooting with AutoISO, the X-T30 responds to changes in light levels with smooth transitions. So smooth it's hard to see the extent to which I'm actually changing the light on this scene. I'm always intrigued to see what a camera will do by the light of a single candle. I was able to capture a custom white balance even at this low light level setting, and it seems like it's fairly accurate. Now, I do have face detect turned on, and although if there's more light it is capturing my face and my eyes, right now it's not. Maybe it will in a second. So we are using the 18 to 55 lens, and that means that with an aperture of f4, we've got the ISO set to 12,800. I'm going to ask him to turn it up to the high setting, the maximum ISO of 25,600, just to give you a sense of what that does. Obviously, it's a little more noisy, and suddenly we seem to have a little bit of a blue cast in the image as well. But just so you know what the camera will do with these settings. Fuji's expanded logarithmic response curve, f-log, can be applied to both internal and external recordings. Using the DSC Labs Xyla chart, each rectangle is 1 stop less than the one to the left. Standard settings reveal 9 rectangles for an 8-stop range. And then, switching to F-Log, the chart reveals 11 stops above the noise floor, a 10-stop range. With F-Log, the minimum ISO is 640, and film simulations are not available. A blank 64GB card holds about 40 minutes of 200 megabit 4K video. When you reach the 10-minute clip limit, the X-T30 stops recording. Recordings are saved in 4GB chunks. Pressing the shutter starts recording again. At 22 degrees Celsius, the overheating icon appeared before a second 10-minute segment was completed. The manual warns that quality decreases at this point. And then 6 minutes later, after 26 minutes of recording, the warning turned red. 15 seconds later, the X-T30 shut itself down. When recording 4K video, the X-T30 is less prone to the rolling shutter effect than similar cameras, and the effect is about the same in HD. The HDMI output works in a simple and straightforward fashion. The currently selected aspect, resolution, and frame rate as output. When HDMI is connected, the LCD or the viewfinder still display, and the touch functions of the screen work to use the silent mode adjustments or for touch focus, which works well enough to do a clean rack focus from one subject to another while recording. Use the AF continuous settings to adjust the speed from slow to fast. I didn't expect to find timecode here, but it's a pretty full-featured implementation. And external recorder control. Pressing the shutter will also start recording on devices that support the Adamus protocol. And if you want to go all in on cinema, select the DCI 4K mode at 24 frames and 200 megabits, then select Eterna and select an exact 180-degree shutter of 1/48. Or select Acros for a historical dive back to the days of the Lumiere brothers. Fujifilm's camera remote app can also act as a remote control for video recording with a limited number of settings. The default and only video setting is 30 frame HD regardless of the setting on the camera. Here, the display is remaining card space, unlike on the camera where it's the remainder of the clip length. Clips are still limited to 15 minutes. However, there's also a start-stop control, which records using the current on-camera settings, so that might be useful. It doesn't display the image from the camera. In addition to the customizable buttons and swipe motions, the functions available on the Q menu can be customized. As well, up to 7 custom configurations can be created, saved, and named. That's a useful feature, so I know what I intended when I saved those settings. Fujifilm provides a good set of playback options. Press Disk to see all the data saved with the image. That includes all of the Q menu settings, as well as settings like Advanced Filter, and this works for both stills and video. There's a full set of RAW to JPEG conversion options, including the ability to set a film simulation, but not Advanced Filter. There's a setting to record a voice memo with each image, which can be helpful. Turn it on for all images, then press the front dial to record during playback. The X-T30's menu makes it straightforward to find items you're looking for, but navigation is becoming more tedious as more items and screens are added. My Menu can be used to simplify that by creating a personal menu with your most used settings. But not all settings, particularly from the setup screens, are available to create My Menus. I find the continual reset to Screen 1, Line 1 to be aggravating, particularly as I'm trying to evaluate options or turn settings on and off, like histogram. Turn it on, and when you go to turn it off seconds later, you're at least 30 clicks away. But some, like MF Assist, are sticky while you're trying to select the right peaking color. And once you've activated My Menu, it becomes the default, but there could be options to select whether to return to Screen 1, the Last Use option, or My Menu. Skipping over dimmed out menu options means there's no way to know why they're not available, and in addition, the manual often doesn't indicate the reason for these exclusions, and there's no help available. And although it's the same battery as other Fujifilm models, performance has improved slightly. It's rated for 380 images. The battery is charged using an included adapter and USB cable. The camera can also be powered using the charger. That's good news. For me, the price gap between the X-T30 and the X-T3 is wider than the functionality gap. If your needs require a camera that feels more substantial, has weather sealing, a few more control buttons, provides longer shooting length and higher data rate for video, and has accessories like a battery grip for portrait shooting, the X-T3 covers those needs. And I expect a firmware upgrade will bring the gap in focus functionality to equivalence. Now there are two things that would make the X-T30 even better. That's a standard-sized mic input, as well as removal of the video recording time limits. And of course, vloggers would love to have a screen that flips forward. Otherwise, from looks to quality, from features to usability, the X-T30 has everything to like. And this is the second camera in 2019 that fulfills on the promise of mirrorless. Small, light, packed with features, great for stills and for video. I can recommend the X-T30 without hesitation. And I hope that helps. Thanks for watching. Shoot until your memory card is full and your battery is empty. Comments below. Please do keep them civil and relevant, and please subscribe if you do that kind of thing.